Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. What a qualifying session in Singapore. Drama everywhere you look. George Russell takes a stunning pole position for Mercedes out of absolutely nowhere. But once again, not the key drama of the day. Max versus Lando, two at this point it seems, of the outside championship contenders getting into some major drama at the end of the qualifying session. Verstappen thinks he might would have had pole if it wasn't for Lando's antics. Norris is far from convinced. What do you guys think about this whole situation? What does it mean for tomorrow? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Plenty to get into. If you're wondering what it looks like, I'm in my grandma's house. It's actually a bed and breakfast here in Wales. I'm swimming in a competition tomorrow, but not the main competition that I wanted to get into today. There's a lot to start off with. I'm just going to dive straight into free practice because the key drama here was actually around Hamilton. It was a very entertaining and chaotic free practice session again. We immediately had, I mean, look at these times. 10 minutes to go. Max is topping the timesheets with a 1:30.1. Russell was right there. Norris was right there. Antonelli was right there. I did tell you guys yesterday to watch out for the Mercedes. Some of you didn't believe me, but look, it's a surprise. It is a surprise that Mercedes turned out to be good around here. They've not been bad here the last couple of years, but I don't think Mercedes expected to be this good around Singapore. But like a couple of times a season, Mercedes just magically put it together in this ground effect era, and they've done it again today, and we'll get into maybe why, but also how it all transpired in a second. This is another big moment for Liam Lawson. Next year, there's been lots of talk about what they're going to do with their driver lineup. Helmut Marko even came out today and said that Alex Dunn is a very aggressive, fast driver, someone they would like to have in their stable. Apparently, I think Kim Illman said in his video the other day, he thinks it's 99% guarantee that Lindblad is getting promoted from Formula 2. Some would say that's too early. Whatever your opinion is, that is probably going to be happening, which means that only Yuki or Lawson can get that other seat. I don't even know if Yuki really wants it at this point, to be honest. I think he'd probably prefer to be out of the Red Bull stable entirely. But who knows? Lawson definitely hasn't done himself any favours crashing again. Look, I've done this plenty of times on the F1 game where you come out of this corner, you get your full car on the curb and then you spin. But it is like a bit of a rookie error, really, because everyone knows if you get your floor plank on top of that curb, you are going to lose grip because your tyres are simply going to leave the surface of the track and you are going to spin out. So Lawson did that. He seemed a bit confused, but yeah, big incident for him. He did eventually get into qualifying, but was not the day that he would have wanted after such a phenomenal Baku weekend, as we know. And if this wants to load, this is the Hamilton drama. So when Lawson crashed, here he goes. Hamilton passes Lawson. Red flag flashing fully on the screen. There is no way that Hamilton doesn't know that it's a red flag, right? I mean, this guy's crashed. This is red. It's red on his dashboard. He absolutely must know. Now, was he going flat out? The answer is no. Was he pushing? Yeah, like he was pushing. Now, he sees a million red flags, and Hamilton, it's not like he's dawdling under this red flag. But also, Hamilton very well knows there's no danger here. He's past the red flag incident. The stewards do not always see it that way. Now, some people were saying that Hamilton, you know, he just ignored a load of red flags. It's like, there's no way he didn't know, right? There's no way he didn't know. But he was certainly not driving as slowly as he could have been, let's say. Now, people look therefore into the guidelines. Failing to slow for red flags, even under free practice, is a 10-place penalty with massive implications, as we well know. Hamilton got done before the race even began in Zandvoort for not the same thing. It was double waved yellows, but again, he was a little bit too trigger happy. We've seen Behrman get done a couple of times for red flags this season in, well, it was Silverstone. It was also Monaco, I think, earlier in the year as well. Maybe there's even more than I remember. What was the big drama about this, though, was that Riccardo Adami, his race engineer, didn't tell him anything. He didn't tell him it was a red flag. Now, of course, Hamilton knows, but he didn't tell him it was a red flag. And he even told him that he could attack the pit entry. Now, it's good that Hamilton didn't attack the pit entry. He didn't fully attack it. He took it a little faster than some, but if he'd have fully attacked it, he would have been penalised here. There was lots of drama about this, and, you know, people were looking at the radio, they were even talking about it on Sky, and saying that, you know, Adami never mentioned anything to Hamilton, which is confusing. Obviously, Hamilton should know, but it was still strange anyway. The end of the session was very dramatic before we get into the conclusion of the Hamilton stuff. Verstappen, Piastri, Russell, Norris, Antonelli were all separated by less than a tenth of a second. It was a mega finish to practice, and it pretty much made it was all open, really, going into qualifying later in the day. Hamilton goes to the stewards. He then walked out of the stewards, and people are like, oh, what's going to happen? To be honest, I thought that he was going to get a penalty for this. I was pretty convinced that he was, having seen what happens, having seen what happened before. the stewards are in an interesting spot where if you slow for the flags, what they deem to be significantly, then it's okay. But if you slow, but you don't slow enough, then they might give you a penalty, which it's a little bit too grey area for my liking that if the stewards just deem that you slowed, but you didn't do enough, then they can slap you with a huge penalty. But that's not what happened to Hamilton. They said that initially it looked like he was going a bit fast, but when they looked at his speed, it was marginally higher than other cars, but he was in full control of his car, did not drive in a manner that could be considered unsafe, he didn't overtake anyone, of course, under the red flag. The stewards consider a greater reduction would have been desirable, but there was no evidence of a breach, and therefore he got away with it. So, yeah, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Look, I saw people saying pro-British bias, I saw people saying anti-British bias. I think Sainz had something similar in Monaco and he got away with it. So, it is what it is. Look, I understand why policing under a red flag is important, but the stewards going overboard with how quick you have to drive under a red flag when there's no real danger, I think is a little bit too far, right? I think the drivers should be within their rights to, as long as they're in control of the car and they're not actually going flat out, within reason, they should be able to drive as they deem sensible in that scenario, right? I don't think we want to baby the drivers to such an extent that they get really concerned about how they're driving under such situations. Hamilton gets away with it, and all of a sudden there was a bit of optimism, right? Hamilton was probably thinking, wow, got away with that one, now we're back, right? Let's hit this qualifying session hard, and we'll look at the way these times transpired. It's pretty remarkable how Ferrari just had no performance when it mattered. So, the session begins, Norris into the 129s, Antonelli into the 130s low, but already you could see that the Mercedes was showing signs. It wasn't just Russell either. Pretty much the whole weekend, Antonelli was really quick. Russell even said after his pole lap that it was Antonelli's data that he was looking at from FP2 yesterday, where of course Russell crashed. That's what makes Russell's performance today even more impressive, is that he crashed yesterday at turn 16, didn't have FP2, based his work for today largely on what he saw from Antonelli yesterday, and he said that helped him a lot. Kimi was really strong this weekend. Probably will feel like he should have even qualified higher than he did. I think his final lap was a little bit scruffy, as was his first one in Q3. Maybe he feels like P2 was even on the cards today, Antonelli. Certainly P3, I think, was on the cards. Gasly, again, was, well, out of the session. I mean, look at him walking off. Look, he must be fuming. We know that the Alpine is terrible. But I will give the credit that is deserving to Franco Colapinto, because over the last 5 Grand Prix, he's out-qualified Gasly. Now look, has Colapinto done anything spectacular? No, because the car's bad, right? But he has out-qualified Gasly 5 or 4 times in the last 5, which is definitely enough, I think, for people to say, you know what, keeping him around might be a sensible idea. Given they've extended Gasly, Colapinto, now he's up to speed, has done a respectable job. The car's still terrible though, so nobody really is going to talk about it all that much. Then Hamilton went to the top of the timesheets. Just note this, right? Q1, Hamilton does a 129.7. Which is basically what he did in Q3, despite all the track improvements and everything that's happened over those several minutes, right, to get to Q3, the Ferrari was basically no quicker. Now, Hamilton was really excited about this session, and Hamilton was even saying before the weekends, he said in Baku, he feels more confident now with this Ferrari than he ever has. He feels like he's starting to understand what it takes to get the best out of it and himself, and it feels like that as well. I think Hamilton's done a good job. It's just the car is terrible when it matters, and Leclerc was furious today with the Ferrari, and we'll talk about that in more detail in a second, because it's just very confusing. I told you guys yesterday that I thought we might have 4 cars at least fighting for the front row. Turned out we had 3. I thought the Ferrari was going to be the 4th, but it was just nowhere when it mattered, right? It looked like it was totally all to play for until, of course, it wasn't. Stroll was out, he wasn't very happy. The Aston Martin showed some promise around this high downforce circuit, but when it really mattered, they did fall away a little bit. There were some investigations for yellow flag infringements, certainly for Russell, and I believe for the others. That was discounted, so there's no concern there if you are a fan of GR63. Q2 gets underway, Verstappen's now into the 129.7s, Antonelli's into the 129.8s. I think that lap time, though, actually got deleted for Antonelli for track limits at turn 2, so we had to go again, and when he did go again, he did a great job, delivered the lap under pressure when he needed. So, I don't know, I think with Kimi, it's a weird one with him. I rate him, I do really believe in Antonelli, you guys know that. I think this season I have been somewhat disappointed by his performance at times. But as soon as your expectations of Antonelli start to drop, he will deliver a good weekend. So I think that he's getting there. I'm excited to see what he can do next year. Antonelli, pressure was on him at this point, and he still delivered a great lap to get into what eventually was Q3, and a very solid performance at that. Hamilton was still in the picture. He was a bit slow, but he was still in the picture. Piastri, Norris, etc., etc. Leclerc, though, was having a shocker. He was down in P13. He had to put another lap. He actually hit the wall pretty bad at the end of that, what is it, the second DRS straight, because there's quite a lot now on this track with the changes they've made to the final sector. He hits the wall here, they make a change to his front wing, he goes out again, he does get the job done, just about to get into Q3. Tsunoda was out big time here. So there was a couple of key talking points of Q2. I think really my star of the show in this session was Ollie Behrman, because Ocon was out in Q1. Behrman was through to Q3, which is again a mega result for him. Just been so impressed by a number of the rookies this season. Ollie Behrman has, I wouldn't say he's gone totally under the radar, but in recent rounds, much of the talk has been about Hadjar and around Bortoletto. I think Behrman's done such a good job this year in the Haas. The points don't always tell that story, but I think it's fair. Leclerc gets through, Lawson's out, Hadjar does make it through. Now, the two Williams, we'll talk about the Williams in a second, because as it stands, we don't have a resolution on this, but they were referred to the stewards for an infringement in their rear DRS, well, it's only rear, what is it? There's only one DRS, in the DRS flap. If that's over 85mm, you will be disqualified. Apparently they both are, and therefore they will likely both be disqualified. So if you're a Williams fan, sorry about that one. Yuki wasn't very happy with the way that things were going, but he ended up in P15, 8 or so tenths off where Max and George were, right at the front of the field, and it looked like we were going to have a straight shootout, but the Ferraris still weren't an absolute million miles away. Q3 gets underway and everyone was pushing to the absolute limit, and this lap from George was nothing short of spectacular. The second lap he was even quicker. The track conditions probably then a little bit better. I think this first lap was, it was magical. It really was magical. We know that Hamilton's lap in 2018 around this circuit is considered one of the best, if not the best, qualifying laps of all time. Russell's lap today was sensational. The resurfacing they've done on the track, yes, it's made the track a bit faster. Did he destroy last year's lap record of a 1:29.5, which was Lando's? Yes, he did. He put in a 1:29.1. The fact that he was on a 1:03.8 after the first two sectors was just so untouchable. Max got close, but it was so untouchable. And yeah, they set their car up in a way, Mercedes, to gain quite a bit on the straights. They were gaining quite a bit on the Red Bull in the straights, but they made it work in the corners too. That car's going to be tough to overtake tomorrow for sure. It may suffer with a bit more tyre deg. Nobody knows what the long run data looks like, to be honest, because nobody really did any. I don't think people expect it to be too necessary, right? Just qualify ahead and take the win. That'll be George's plan. But a 1:29.1, I mean, Antonelli's lap was solid, but it was not close to George's. And for him to pull that lap out of the bag when it mattered at such a... I mean, this is a driver's track, right? Singapore is a challenging circuit. And I think that Russell... Look, he's making a bit of a statement maybe to Toto, but I think equally Toto is thinking, yeah, this is exactly why my approach of giving my drivers a 1+1 is the way to go. Because look at George delivering when the pressure is to some extent on. But... yeah, what a driver Russell is. I think all the times, especially on the Saturday, the reality is it doesn't matter what Russell does. Max is still Max, right? Which is what Toto will think. But unbelievable lap, like genuinely mesmerizingly good. Verstappen ended up purple, but P2, 2 tenths down. Piastri was a bit further back. And nobody really improved on their second run, right? Hamilton was saying, my tyres are out of the window. That, it's 1 degree cooler. You need to tell me what to do on the outlaps here to make this work. And it seems that Mercedes had the strategy. As you guys can see, Russell here went out early, right, compared to some of the others. They went later, but actually that meant their tyres were probably in a worse spot than the Mercedes guys were. Russell's second lap was also spectacular, right? I mean, the fact that he did 2 laps within 7 thousandths, nobody got close to it. Max wasn't far away. Now, Kimi, I just saw a quote that he actually made after qualifying, and he said he really thinks pole was on today, certainly the front row. He just thinks he pushed a bit too hard on the final 2 quali runs, but he thinks he was right in the mix, and I think that was a fair assessment. Max was also right in the picture, but after a yellow sector 2 and an aborted final sector, he ends up in 3rd. Key talk again about Norris. I mean... He had a decent opportunity, but Max then aborted his third sector due to the drama that we are about to get into. So George Russell takes an unbelievable pole position. Max then throws a thumbs up to Norris round the final corner as Lando pulls into the pit. And this is the reason why. Max then comes out and says, I made a mistake because there was a car cruising 2 seconds in front of me and it definitely wasn't Oscar. Max then said, that's noted, that will be remembered. Now, when Max says something will be remembered, it will be remembered. If there's one driver on the grid that I would expect to hold a grudge, it is Max Verstappen. We know what happened in Brazil 2022. There are other examples as well, but Brazil 2022 still lives in my head rent-free because Max, with no reason, no pressure or anything, refused to give up that position to Perez at the end of the race that was asked by the team. And afterwards, the big drama was that Max believed, and maybe he had right to believe, that Perez had deliberately crashed in Monaco earlier that year to prevent Verstappen out qualifying him. And therefore, Max decided to not say anything publicly, but hold that grudge until the end of time, until he got his revenge. When Max says something will be remembered and that he will get his own back for it, there is a 99% plus chance that Max will at some point get Norris back for this. Now, did Norris do anything wrong? That is genuinely, I think, a good question. So this was the mistaken question. Max was in the mix for pole. It wasn't, it was possible. I don't think he was right on the money. I think he had a little bit of time to find. He thinks maybe it was doable. He was purple earlier. This is the corner, turn 16. You guys can actually see if you look closely. He locks up the front left, coming into the corner. He goes really wide of the apex, and, he goes too far over the exit curb, loses a bunch of time. This is Lando Norris, right? So, at this point, is Lando about 2 seconds ahead of Max? Yes. At this point, Lando is obviously well around the corner already. Now, did Lando do this deliberately? Did Lando deliberately slow down during the lap to make sure that Max had some dirty air in the final corner? I don't really think so. Would it have been gentlemanly, maybe, from Lando to push harder, or from his engineer to tell him, hey, push a bit harder through here just to make sure your dirty air is clear of Max? Was it a tactic from Lando? I don't really think so. Did Lando impede Max? Certainly not, right? Now, I see the quotation on this tweet here. It is a bit more complicated than that. Yes, Lando's already round the corner in this shot. Will there be a little bit of turbulence still? Even though he's going slowly in the air through these corners, there will be a little bit. Not much at all, but maybe a touch, and maybe enough when you're absolutely on the limit to mean that the car is generating a little bit less downforce, the tyre has to do a little bit more work, and if you're right on the limit as Max was, maybe that was enough. Max believes that Lando's positioning here affected him in this braking zone. And, I get it for sure, and I'm not saying Max is necessarily wrong, but I do feel a bit bad for Lando, right? I think he's being a little bit harshly treated here, because I don't really think there was much he really could have done, right? And anyway, Max wasn't happy. He passes him, gives him the thumbs up. The rest is history. Max says that he thinks pole was on, if not for that moment. He was asked, what about Lando? And he says, look, it's pretty clear. In general, we're quite good at not doing that. We tried to stay out of the way. Sometimes it's complicated, but in this case, it could have been avoided. He says everyone's trying to find their gaps. That's why everyone's 7 to 8 seconds apart. And then when you get to the last sector and there's a car 2 to 3 seconds ahead of you, you simply lose time. That's how it is. You lose downforce from braking. That's what happens. I didn't lose my front end once all weekend, but you just brake at the same point and then it blocks up. It is a shame. So look, Maxim in the car is convinced that he broke at that same point all weekends and it was totally fine apart from this moment. So would I be annoyed if I was Max? Yeah, I think I would be. Does it feel a little bit harsh on Lando given that it wasn't, any obvious impeding or anything? Feels a little harsh. And Lando, he threw his own, back into the ring as well. Now look, I feel like, you guys know that I'm not the biggest fan of Lando's mentality, right? But I do think that on this one, Lando is within his right, I think, to clap back a little bit. And even though, again, he's had a difficult day today and he's had a tough weekend full stop, but Lando says they always complain, Red Bull. They always complain about everything. That is Red Bull. And he doesn't say Max specifically, but certainly that's the implication, that he just thinks Max is crying for no reason. So, yeah, true to your thoughts on that in the comment section below. Definitely big drama between two guys that are still championship contenders, right? Although Piastri will be feeling very happy about it as a result of this weekend's. The Ferrari guys were in no man's land. Charles Leclerc has already decided the weekend is over, even though it's only qualifying. He said, I don't know what to say anymore. I'm sorry, but the car is undrivable. So that was quite the statement. Hamilton then said, look, my Q1 time was the same as my Q3 time. So where was the improvement? And Hamilton says, if you look at Mercedes, they prepared the tyres way better than Ferrari did. He feels like there's a lot to learn from that. Even the overall execution from Ferrari today, the way they used the tyres in qualifying was pretty bad as well. Leclerc says, I'm angry. You know, if Mercedes that should struggle in the heat does a pole, then what are we meant to do? You know, we should have done way better than that. So, very dramatic. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments for sure. Can Max still win tomorrow? Absolutely right. I think we looked at this weekend as like, all right, can Max keep the championship alive? I think he still can, right? Looking at the grid for tomorrow, Max will still feel like he can win. Piastri back on solid form. Again, solid lap, puts in a decent lap, ends up P3. This is the type of Piastri we're used to. Norris just wasn't quite good enough, and I think getting past Antonelli is going to be a challenge. So that's tomorrow. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.